Just finished episode 2 of the Orville, and I think overall there were a few uneven elements, but it really showed me where I hope the series is going to go, the direction I hope that it heads, and where I think it'll be most successful. And in that I mean, the opening to the episode had me a little worried about where things were going. The part with the parents went on a little bit too long, the comedy felt a little flat, it just wasn't quite there, it felt a little too much like a stretched out Family Guy joke in a way, like it just didn't quite work. But where I thought the episode did a really great job was actually when it moved a little bit away from the comedic elements. I actually think it's at its best when it's emulating a more Star Trek feel, when it's a little more serious but has still some comedic banter. When it is in that realm, I think it evens out and really hits its stride. When it goes a little bit too far into being in comedy territory, I think it doesn't quite work as well, and those few elements I think are where the episode wasn't quite perfect. I do have to say the thing with the Desperate Housewives and all that stuff, reality television thing at the end, was actually pretty funny. That worked pretty well. That was one moment that I thought was pretty interesting, but overall I think the episode itself, and I think the series in general, is going to be this way. It was actually at its best when it was a little more towards just serious adventure, fun sci-fi, and moving a little bit out of that almost self-parody realm of comedy. It's not to say all the comedy was bad. I think where it's going to fit well and where it kind of hit a happy medium in the dialogue and the interactions, as far as I'm concerned, is where it was a little more towards, I'd say, almost like Stargate style dialogue within a very Star Trek sort of feeling series overall. It feels very Next Generation mixed with original series, with more Stargate style dialogue in that, and the interactions between characters. In that I mean, it feels very modern, a little less highbrow, a little more commonplace, you know what I mean? It kind of fits that style right there, as far as comparing that to typical dialogue within, say, an episode of Next Generation or any variety of Star Trek. I think overall that's where it's really going to hit its stride, is when it moves a little bit away from that the straight comedy elements and the straight comedy scenes, and lets the comedy play out a little more subtly, and really just kind of integrates it in a way that feels a little more natural and a little less straight comedy. The sci-fi elements work really well. I love the touches. It definitely has such a great Star Trek vibe without being fully Star Trek, which I think works really well. Something I didn't mention the first time, and this I saw even more in this one, a lot of the music cues, and especially if you really pay attention, just listening to the sounds and the way the fade-outs work when they go to a commercial break, and go and watch, say, an episode of The Next Generation, it feels that vibe very, very much. I think a lot more of the action elements feel more original series. I think there's a great mix of everything. I love the opening sequence. It actually reminded me a lot visually of Voyager's opening. The tone of it, as far as the theme song, felt a little different in that. Obviously, it had a little bit more of a Next Generation vibe, but I think there are so many little hints of what made Star Trek great within this, but it's different enough that it feels like its own thing. It feels like something that's just paying homage to Star Trek, and really feels the love of especially more 90s era Star Trek without being a straight up just we're trying to be Star Trek. To me, I think it hit that balance pretty well. The only part I think the show needs to work on a little bit more is, again, balancing, finding where those straight comedy elements are going to play out compared to the more traditional sci-fi elements. Like it almost feels like two different shows in a way, and it's not quite sure which way it's going, and I hope it goes one direction more than the other. Overall, though, I found it incredibly enjoyable, and the overall plot felt like a good episode of Star Trek. It felt very Star Trek in a way that I enjoyed, and I really am enjoying Dr. Claire and Alara's characters more than anyone else so far. I think that's done really well. I do think a little bit of the banter when they're in the zoo and everything didn't always work, but I think overall worked really, really well. Again, a slightly imperfect episode, but something that I really, really enjoyed, and there's so many elements in there that it gives me a lot of hope for the future of the series if it goes in one direction a little more than the other, and I just hope that it pushes more towards that sci-fi direction and a little bit less towards the comedy, just keeps the comedy elements in but stays away again from that slapsticky or parody style comedy. I think it can work really well. I'm really excited for the Orville so far, and I can't wait to see episode 3.